Lars Larson Show. Glad to be with you, and I'll get back to your calls in a moment at 866-439-5277. Emails go to talk@larslarson.com. Michael Johns joins me now, President and Executive Director of the Tea Party Community and former speechwriter for President George Herbert Walker Bush. Ms. Johns, thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure, Lars. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'll admit up front I'm a Trump partisan. I endorsed him a couple of months ago, and I make no secret of that. Should the rest
as mine.
Well, and I guess what I'm wondering is, should we get the rest of the Republicans behind Donald Trump and make this a winner, or should we spend the next couple of months, dinking around while the Democrats continue to have, Hillary and Bernie going at each other? We've got the chance for the first time in a long time to get a little bit of a head start on them toward fall, and it seems like we're wasting it.
Can there be any bigger no-brainer question? I mean, I cannot for the life of me. Well, I do understand it, and it's explainable, but it's not explainable in the way they're explaining it, why these objections exist. And I think ultimately it comes down to one of the reasons that we like Trump, and that is that he is not controlled by this hierarchy of known and some lesser-known political figures attached to Washington and all of its doings that don't feel they have their claws into him. And, what's the most compelling argument to make against the guy? Well, the two logical things. One, he's not conservative enough. That's a lie, in my judgment. Complete lie, in fact. I think he's probably one of the more conservative presidential candidates we've had since Reagan. He ranks with any one of them, in my judgment. Or that he can't win, when, of course, we've got polling numbers that show him neck and neck with Hillary Clinton, and I think for the first time you got a Republican candidate who really can compete almost in all 50 states. I mean, maybe not the most, extensively liberal ones, but, he's going to compete in the Northeast, which is something to be said that you couldn't say that for McCain, you couldn't say that for Romney. He's got a chance that he could win, Pennsylvania, he can win New York State. He can compete in New Jersey. I mean, that's a really big deal to be able to change, I think, the political demographic that the party's appealing to. And I have always felt that we needed to communicate better with working Americans than we had been. We talked about tax cuts a lot in the 80s, and that made sense when people were heavily concerned about that. You have over half the country that's not paying federal income taxes. So that's not a terribly meaningful message at that level. But the things he's talking about, trade, where we're just being decimated with these bad trade deals, the open border, which is, clearly with inflating our labor force and thus deflating wages and creating unemployment, the work visa issue, which I don't believe has received any scrutiny in my judgment. I mean, to look at all of these overextended visas and the ramifications of that in an era of terror, I just think he's hitting all the hot buttons. And these guys are freaking out.
I know. I mean, Michael, my main studios are in Portland, Oregon, and one of the biggest employers around here is the Intel Corporation. They just announced they're laying off 10%, a little over 10% of their workforce, and that's worldwide. And we're talking thousands and thousands of jobs. And a lot of us are wondering out loud, does that mean they're laying off Americans and that they're going to ship in their replacements when they need them under H-1B visas at a substantial discount? These are all really important issues. And it's very frustrating to me that what I think the party wants to hang on to is just as you suggested, power. And if they have a guy who shows up on the scene who doesn't owe anything to anyone, and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about the kind of things, and I've tried to describe it to my audience, that when you run for president, it usually means you've been in politics for a while. You've run for local offices, you've run for some lower-level national offices, and by the time you get to Marco Rubio's, position, or Ted Cruz, or even John Kasich, there are a lot of people that you owe. That you don't owe them money, but you owe them allegiance. And this guy shows up, and he doesn't have to have any allegiance to anybody except the voters. And I think that scares the daylights out of the professional politicians.
I think it's also unveiled what the agreements essentially have been between the Republican establishment and these money sources. And I think it largely has had to do with trade. They want this TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They want this thing done desperately. Trump opposes it. They had already kind of made headway. Rubio supported it. All of the leadership is for it. They were for it before they even read it, just like the Democrats were with Obama, with Obamacare. And then this H-1B visa program that you just mentioned has got to be the most unscrutinized component of pressing policy issues confronting the country, in my judgment. And it's clear to me there, too, that there is a lot of money involved, global money, not even U.S. money, that's designed to bring in foreign employees. We were sold this story on the H-1B visa program that we needed this program, and this was said in the 90s, I can recall, when this thing first started, that we had this deficiency in certain sectors of the technology market, and we needed this labor pool. And the economy was humming then, and people just said, okay, well, fine, yeah, it makes sense. Let's go get those people. It's turned out, as the program's really starting to get some scrutiny, famously the Disney case, I think, is one of the best examples, that these employees that are being brought in have no particular skills.
They're not Stephen Hawking, and they're not they're smart people, but they're not some kind of specialized skill set that nobody has here.
Right.
They just happen to be software writers who work for less than Americans work for.
Yeah, well, I thought what's really intriguing with the Disney case, which apparently is very common, is not only did they not know how to do the job that they were going to be taking, but that the American employee that they were replacing was signing basically non-disclosure agreements and other kinds of agreements with the foreign worker to train them for a series of months. So you're literally bringing in someone who, as you correctly said, has sort of got enough walking around knowledge to be able to do the job, but hasn't necessarily done exactly that job anywhere. So it's completely fallacious how we were sold on this H-1B program, and it's been hugely destructive to American jobs. And I just can't, I just think Trump is so on target, and I'm so impressed with the messaging. And I guess most concerning to me right now is he's got to stand his ground, he's going to get down there on Thursday with Paul Ryan, with behind the closed door meetings, and I'm just terribly concerned about the level of pressure they're going to bring on him, and that he has enough, hopefully, strength, as I think he does, which is his appeal, to stand against it. And, because the people are with him. I mean, millions upon millions of Americans have come out and said, yes, that's exactly what we need done. Paul Ryan and his crew are in no position, I don't believe, to be dictating to Trump that he needs to be altering his messaging or his policies on these fundamental issues that the American people are embracing.
Well, in some ways, Michael...
And that we need.
I agree. But in some ways, Michael, all these supposedly smart people in politics who know the game, they've been in it for decades, and for the last 8 months, I've been watching nothing but a string of people saying, why, he just said that. That's going to be the death knell of his campaign. And then his numbers go up. And then he says something else. And they say, well, no, but none of us could ever say anything like that. And his numbers go up. And every time they've declared the death of the Donald Trump campaign because of something he said or a way he expressed it or anything else, they've declared that's the end of it. And, of course, the American people say, no, it's not. He's doing just fine. It's you folks that aren't getting it. Michael, keep up the good work, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lars.
You bet. Michael Johns, President and Executive Director of the Tea Party Community. Back in a moment. I'll get right to your phone calls. Glad to have you with me.